Welcome to the HVAC Guide live show where we talk about all things HVAC that no one is talking about. At least that's our goal here. Provide something that you can't get elsewhere. We are sometimes joined by others in the chat that are in the trade. So feel free to ask a question or two. My favorite shows, especially when I'm flying solo like this, is when the chat gets hopping and we get down a rabbit hole of talking about something in our industry. So feel free. Thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday night to join us here live. I'm broadcasting live from Virginia if you haven't seen our show before. And yeah, I've got a jam-packed show for you guys tonight. I have a crazy news story that we'll get to momentarily. In the meantime, if you're joining us, feel free to say hello in the chat. Let us know where you are at, where. That's always fun to know where you're at in the world. And that's always fun to see. So before I say hello to all you guys, and bring you, those of you that have said hello in the chat, highlighting that, I do want to start the show off with a question of the night. Let me find it here. Bear with me here. So here's tonight's question of the night. Tonight's question of the night is, do you run a schedule on your thermostat? I did post that on our channel earlier. Bear with me here. I'm going to try to pull that up, what the response was on that. And while I'm pulling that up, if you want to, answer that in the chat. Do you run a schedule on your thermostat? If so, why? Have you seen a savings on your utility bills? Is it placebo effect? That's the question here. Is it really worth running a schedule at the end of the day? And let's see. Can I switch to this? So yeah, so it looks like I say, I just posted it only a half hour ago. And it looks like 13 of you have already answered. Most of you, over 50%, say, no, I do not run a schedule on my thermostat. 15% of you say yes. So what is that? One out of every, 1, 2, 3. So 9 people, I guess, 8 people. How does the math work out on that? 8 or 9 people does run a schedule. 23% of you said my thermostat can't run a schedule. So you still have either a old school thermostat, something we would call a not smart thermostat. All these thermostats say they're smart thermostats. So I jokingly call some of them dumb thermostat. And then 8% of you said you can't even find your thermostat. Maybe you don't have one in your home. Maybe you don't have conventional air. So you are not running a schedule either. So pretty interesting that we still have almost a third of people saying they have a thermostat that cannot run a schedule even if they wanted to. So that's interesting. Let me see if I can make my face a little smaller so you guys can see that. So yeah, there's the and like I say, I only posted it a half hour ago. Usually I get about 100 or 200 votes on a poll. But we see it trending towards, folks saying either they have a thermostat that cannot, or they simply just simply don't use it. They don't run a schedule on their thermostat. I remember I had a good friend of mine when I lived in Richmond, Virginia years ago that was diligent. He ran his schedule on his thermostat, and he stayed on top of it big time. He was always, if he was going to get home early, he would, adjust his schedule and so on. So Gary says, good evening, Josh and friends. So hello to Gary. Always good to see you. Let me see if I can bump this down here. Ryan says, hello, Ryan from Charlotte. Good to see you, pal. I run a schedule. No real savings though. Yeah. I feel like a lot of those sorts of habits, if you will, if you were to change a habit, if you did run a schedule and you were to save a buck, it would have to be over time for you to really even notice anything, if you ever did, right? Um, I'm sure there are times of the year where it does make sense, and then there might be times of the year where it just simply doesn't. Where imagine you've turned off your system for this extended amount of time while you're not there, and then your system has to work extra hard to meet temperature and get back up to a comfortable temperature right before you walk through the door, right? That's the point here. And some systems, inefficient systems where the auxiliary heat possibly might be kicking on, maybe it just simply would not make sense from a utility standpoint. So Don says, I do not run a schedule on my thermostat. Emery says, I just leave it at the same temperature 24/7, even though I can schedule it. So yeah, all kinds of different thoughts on that. I'm actually with you guys. I have a thermostat that I do. It's Wi-Fi capable, and I'll adjust it from time to time for one reason or another. Maybe if I know I'm not going to be home for an extended amount of time, maybe I'll adjust that. But I do not run it on a schedule. But I will admit, my wife works from home. I'm working from home sometimes, and maybe that's more of the reason why we don't run a schedule. So Emery says, does Daikin make it own T-stars? I think you're asking, does Daikin make their own thermostats? So they don't package anything, but I do know that they do. I don't even know what the word is. Um they contract it out. Maybe that's the right word. Some of the manufacturing sometimes. I think that might be what they've described to me in some cases. But it's not like you're getting a Nest or a Honeywell thermostat with a Daikin sticker on it. I have seen other manufacturers um, do that. One in particular takes a Honeywell, some of the old Honeywell thermostats, and they would simply put their emblem on there. One thing I forgot to do at the beginning of the show, if you guys will allow, and that is if I could just take a moment to pay the bills and thank the sponsor of tonight's show. Bear with me here, and I'll be with you in just a moment.
Are you still using this old remote to control your AC? Upgrade to the Klima Smart Controller and unlock a host of smart functions to help you reduce energy consumption by 30% and automate home climate. And the best part, it's compatible with all brands of air conditioners, mini splits, and heat pumps. Now you can control your AC from anywhere in the world, schedule your AC, see your bills in real time, switch off your AC automatically based on occupancy, and even detect open windows. Everything to keep energy consumption as optimized as possible. Upgrade your AC experience today.
Now, I know you guys are thinking, oh, you did that on purpose. You were talking all about thermostats. I promise I did not do that on purpose. I just simply forgot to play that at the beginning of the show. And then as we were talking about thermostats, so yeah, Boldr is one of our new sponsors. And so thank you to those folks for sponsoring our show. Yeah, let's get to tonight's crazy news story. So bear with me as I get moved over to that. This news story comes from an elementary school in Maryland, and it's a little bit of a different read, if you will. Let me make my face a little smaller here. And what I mean by that about it being a different read, it's not like our typical article that I will sometimes see, in for a news station. So they've written it from there. There is a part here where this fella named Adam Pugnoko, is the person that wrote this beginning. And then as we move further down in the article, you'll see where we actually get to read the manuscript from a meeting, from a committee meeting or board of education. Maybe it's the school board, possibly. I'm not sure. We'll get to that in just a second. But I thought it was very interesting. I have not finished this, so I actually don't know how this ends. But I did read some of it enough to go, ooh, this is very interesting. So again, coming out of Maryland, very, very recent. In fact, this was written today or launched today, March 25th. So let's see. Adam says, last week, I wrote about the PTA president of New Hampshire Estates Elementary School had testified before the school board that, quote, every single staff member and student is breathing in mold, unquote, at her school. I also published MCPS's response vowing to find a solution. Now, under questioning by a school board member, a top MCPS official confirmed that the district had installed an HVAC system at the school in 2018 that had not fixed the problems. Well, duh. HVAC systems don't simply just fix a mold problem. The system costs MCPS $1.9 million. You heard that right. Almost $2 million for an HVAC system. Last week's school board fiscal management committee meeting, Board of Education member Laura Stewart brought up the problems at New Hampshire Estates Elementary School that followed presentation of a list of facilities projects that did not include the school. Following is a transcript of her exchange with MCPS Deputy Chief of Facilities Management, Adnan Mamoon. Okay, so as we move through this transcript, I'm going to just simply refer to them as Ms. Stewart and Mr. Mamoon because as you'll see, it has their entire title and name at the beginning of each one of their statements. So yeah, this is very interesting. So check this out. Ms. Stewart says, a school became news this last week, New Hampshire Estates. I do not see it on the list. I did look up to see when was the last time they were renovated was 1988. That was actually a renovation, so it was built, I believe, maybe in the 40s or 50s. I can't remember. But looking at the pictures that was provided, we know that has issues. So can we add a school to the list, especially this New Hampshire Estates, which again meets the 35 plus year line? I don't know how hard your line is here. Mr. Mamoon says, no, again, the contract we have with them is for all the facilities. And so, oh man, so they didn't even, this is going to be rough because they put every, in here. So anyway, bear with me, guys. We were more focusing on the timing, making sure that we had enough time to review a certain number of schools before the next CIP capital budget cycle. We can certainly look to add New Hampshire Estates. I don't think that would be an issue. One of the things I wanted to point out, again, we know the challenges of New Hampshire Estates, and I've been there several times, and we're working closely with the schools to address the issues. And while I'm here, I'm going to provide an update that we would have given the update to the board anyway, based on the testimony we've heard, is that there are several things that's happening here. We have our inner air quality team visiting the school. We also have our FIT team, facilities improvement team, which looks at the HVAC units. So there is some fundamental issues with the HVAC units in that building, even though they were replaced in 2018, which is where the condition index doesn't accurately reflect the challenges with the building. Because you have had newer units in the building, that will actually lower your score, making it look like it doesn't fit the bill. So, however, when the units were replaced, that didn't address the fundamental challenge, which was the circulation of fresh air inside the building. So, ventilation, got it. So, what we have done in the process is we have engaged an engineering firm to start looking at what the solutions are. So yeah, we are working to find solutions for New Hampshire Estates as we speak. We'll provide more details about that. Ms. Stewart says, that's good news. Thank you. And yes, I know. I'm aware that some of these schools that are having issues actually had HVAC systems put in their schools not that long ago. And yet there are still issues. And so those engineering solutions, I'm sure, need to be looked at, even if it's a newer system. So they've got the Educational Facilities Master Plan confirms that New Hampshire Estates received an HVAC replacement, blah, blah, blah. So we don't really care about that, or at least I don't. But this guy goes on to write, MCPS has been aware of the problems at the school for a long time. It chose a $2 million solution that its deputy chief of facilities now admits didn't address the fundamental challenge of air circulation in the building. And now it's back at the school after its PTA president brought a batch of moldy pictures to a school board meeting. Wow. Superintendent Thomas Taylor has made a huge operating budget request for the county's elected leaders. He will get most of it. He will make he will get most, if not all of it, even if the county council passes a property tax increase to fund it. In return, he should insist that his subordinates spend the money competently, a requirement that apparently has not always applied to schools like this one. Well, it's always easy to say those things in hindsight, right? We do that all the time, right? Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, what do y'all think of all this? Obviously the school spent a lot of money, um, and only to have more issues. And I do wonder if the new HVAC system that was installed in 2018 was installed so that way, so to address this issue, because obviously it did not address those issues. So yeah, pretty crazy story there. I think that a lot of times when we look at things like that, folks are commercial is a whole nother animal. I remember talking to a guy about a heat load calculation maybe a month or two ago, and he was basically telling me that yeah, it's a whole nother animal, and that there's things you have to account for especially think about a school. So there are times when that classroom has, a crowd of people in there. And then there are other times, more times when it does not. When the room is simply empty. So I think that has always been a problem. That has always been a concern for folks, especially folks that want to do things correctly. And how are you going to address those issues? And I don't think they are addressed like they should be. A lot of times, they're I remember this in this exact conversation I'm talking about, where he just said, well, just throw this size system in there, and then if it's not big enough, we'll throw more. And I was just like, wow, this is different. This is different than a home, a really tight home and envelope. So very interesting. Ryan says, I wonder if the HVAC contractor saw the mold and said something about it, or ignored, thinking it could affect them getting the contract. It's always part of this, right? Um, I've encountered things like that in my career. I remember a realtor years ago. They had brought me in to address an issue, and I told them, hey, I just want you to know I see this other problem over here, this huge problem. And I don't want to get into too many specifics, but it was a bad problem. It was it wasn't a safety issue necessarily, because then I would have pushed even harder, right? But it was an issue where if I were purchasing this home, it's going to be a problem, you know? And so I tried to tell the realtor that, and they said, hey, you could hurt the sale of this home. And I think you just need to keep that to yourself and do what you were hired to do. And, that kind of told me what I needed to hear, which the realtor was not interested in hearing what else I had to say. Um, Ryan says, but if the school spent $2 million, I guess they would have addressed it had they known. They would have at least attempted to. I think that's a really good point, though, because the question becomes for me is, did they spend all this money to address that issue and it didn't? Or did they spend all this money to simply get an HVAC system that then caused the problem? Right. So if they didn't have mold issues, and then they so possibly replaced the system with an oversized heating and air system. Maybe it had ventilation before and now it doesn't, right? Maybe it was sized one way and then they said, well, if we're spending all this money, let's just go ahead and put the biggest thing we can in there. Well, you can't do that. Obviously, what's causing that mold issue? That's the question here. So, was it something pre heating and air system replaced? I do think it's funny though. I mean, 2018, what is that? 7 years ago, and they said new heating and air system. System was replaced. It's brand new. It was replaced 7 years ago. Which, some would argue that it's now served half its life. But it's just always cracked me up. I remember that, and at my company, folks would say, "Oh yeah, it's a new system. It's 4 years old." Well, I guess it's new. So anyway, yeah, pretty crazy story there. So, what you guys got? Any crazy heating and air questions? Emery says, "Had my system checked, and the tech told me I had mold in the plenum. Should I be worried?" Well, um, it's a good question, Emery. Why is it there? What can be done? Can we put a UV light in there? I personally I wouldn't just leave it, but I'm also not a mold expert. I'm a heating and air guy. So, having that air tested would be good. When I did property management, mold was a bad word. I used to jokingly say M as in Matthew. We'd call it the M word, but it was too close to sounding like we were saying that N word, and people would say, "Oh, what are you talking about over there?" So I stopped calling it that. But mold was definitely a bad word, and we were actually trained to not say that word in front of our tenants, people that were renting from us. We were to never say the word mold in front of them at the company I worked at. So, because that would open a whole nother can of worms that if you ended up in a courtroom, they would describe to us that the tenant could say, "Well, you knew there was mold. You said the word mold. I have you on recording saying the word mold." I thought text could not say the mold word. Yeah, exactly. Ryan knew exactly where I was going there. How the mold formed inside plenum? Yeah, good question. How is it there, Emery? Emery may not know, but that's a question to be answered, right? Why is it there? How did it get there? Is that mold sweating? Mold is that duct sweating? Do we have another issue or two there? What do we need to look at there? Yeah, pretty crazy. I was supposed to have a guest on tonight's show, and if Ben happens to see this, I do want to apologize to him. I don't think I got an email from him I normally send out an introductory email asking for a few things, and it's possible that I didn't send it. I'm pretty sure I did, but maybe he didn't see mine, or he's a busy guy. So, but I do want to have Ben on 1 week. He's in charge of all of the training, and I don't know what his title is right off top of my head, but he's basically when it comes to any trainings or education at Daikin, Ben is either in charge of it or involved in it in some way. So it'll be really cool to hear his perspective on all the changes that we're up against and some of the challenges that heating and air guys and homeowners are facing when it comes to all of these changes, because I'm sure it could be quite a task to you got all these folks that are learning what we all learned in the last 50 years, right? When I got in this trade, we were using the same technologies and practices that we had used for 40-50 years before that, and then now this industry is just changing dramatically, big time, with all the technologies, the refrigerants, the inventions, all the crazy things that we're seeing come out in our industry. Ryan says maybe they had an improperly installed humidifier or had the plenum wasn't sealed. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Brian says, love the knife. Awesome, man. I have to shout out to my buddy Stuart down at the Johnstone Supply in Williamsburg. He actually donated that to me for my show that week. So, for those of you that don't know what Brian's talking about, we did a giveaway on our channel a few weeks back when we hit a milestone. I don't know if it was the one we hit 150,000 subscribers. I think it was. And so we did a giveaway, and Brian says the hat fits great. Nice, man. Yeah, so we did a giveaway, and I got to tell y'all, the giveaways were interesting because I spent more money shipping that stuff than I did on the items that were being shipped in some cases. Not all cases, but in a bunch of the cases. So I was like, shoot, I might as well just ship everybody something from Amazon or something, rather than these hats and cups that I have. So I still have, I bet I have 100 of those cups or more. We had some advertising dollars from one of our companies at my heating and air company, and the girl that worked for me, she bought a whole bunch of cups, so I still have a whole lot of those cups. So Ryan says, thank you for the hat and cups. Awesome. You're welcome. It's almost camping season. We have an RV. I'm going to put a bunch of those cups in our RV. So a bunch of Griffin Air cups. Griffin Air. But yeah, pretty cool. I got a video I'm working on soon. I sat in a class at HVAC Excellence that I want to tell you guys about. So the class was put on by a guy named James, what is his name? Branyan, I think. And we might be actually doing a video with him on our channel soon too. He said he would. But James, I don't know all of his titles or accolades, but give me just a second. I'm going to try to find it. He works at Daikin, and he is, I can't remember if he's the only one or if he's one of the only people in America that has received the, I'm going to say it wrong, but I think it's Tukame, something like that title. So it's sort of like, so they have their dojo, and they have all these words that they use that remind me of something you would hear in some of the martial arts that are out there. And he holds the title of basically a master, like a black belt or whatever. And I'm sure hopefully he is on our channel so he can fix all this. I'm sure shoot, what's the word? I'm sure I'm not doing him justice. But anyway, so he's either the only one or one of the only folks that hold that title in America. There's a bunch of them in Japan, I think, and maybe other parts of the world, but there's only one or not very many here in America that hold that title. And James did a talk on brazing. So he holds that title in brazing. Like, it's a big deal to be able to braze correctly when you're brazing these systems and copper and aluminum and all these different things. Anyway, he gave a class on brazing, and I went to that, and there was, I don't know, 150 people in the room. And it was weird because, I learned a lot in there for sure, but there were folks that were in there as well that were like, hey, I've been doing this trade for decades. I remember one guy said, I've been doing this for, 35 years. And I just found out for the first time that I've been doing it wrong all this time. And I've never claimed to be, because brazing itself is almost an art. Heating and air guys that can braze really good, like a really good joint, and get it to flow right and get it to pull up into the joint itself, and they, it's an art. I remember having a guy that worked with me that I saw him do one, and I said, "You're going to do all of them if I'm on the job with you from now on." And anyway, so James did that class, and it was just so cool because there were, like I said, there were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of years of experience all in that room if you added it all up. And guys were like, "Man, nobody's ever taught me what you're teaching me right now." And it all made total sense what he was teaching. But it was a really cool class, and I'm hoping to have James on our YouTube channel at some point to talk about some of that, because I don't think it's talked about enough in our industry. In fact, one of the things that he said in that class, and I thought it rang so true, because it's not just brazing, but it's a bunch of things in our trade, is you do it the way the guy that taught you how to do it does it. And you're teaching your helper the way you learned, right? And you got all these folks that are just doing things the way they were taught, but not understanding they were taught incorrectly from the very get-go. And of course, it's you guys, it's homeowners then end up paying the price when some of this stuff is not done correctly, when they're not flowing nitrogen correctly, when they're not getting a good cap on their braze, or whatever the thing they're trying to do. And if they've never been taught correctly, and that's why I actually pulled James aside after the class and said, "Man, would you be willing to do a video with me? Because um there, I think that we need to get and he said that, he's like, "I want to get this information out more." And I was like, I pulled him aside after the class and said, "Well, let's do it. Let's do a video or two and try to get some of this information out better, because you know folks just aren't they some in some cases don't even know they're doing it wrong, you know so I cannot wait to do that. So back to our chat here. Brian says, "My RV hits Shredfest next month." Nice. I don't know what Shredfest is, but it sounds like a lot of fun. I got all excited for Daikin Hero, no go for VRV3. Okay. I went to the Daikin Hero class at HVAC Excellence. Mark McQuay gave the talk, and it was really good. It's way over my head in some cases because I don't do a whole lot of he says it's a one wheel event. Got it. But yeah, I don't do a lot of commercial, but it was still really cool. I went there just to kind of, get more info on all of that. And it was very interesting. Did you see any YouTubers there? So I saw a few folks. I don't know if y'all know who Brett Wetzel is, but he's the host of the Advanced Refrigeration podcast. He was there. I even told him while I was there, I was like, half the time when you're talking, you're up here and I'm down here, and I don't even know what you're talking about, because you're on another level. So he is a really smart guy. So he was there. Jennifer Manzo was there. I went to her class. And that was pretty good. Ty Branneman was there. He's been on our show. And I didn't get to go to his class because I think I was actually in that brazing class I was just telling you about during his class. But I heard a lot of good things about Ty's class. So they were all there. HVAC Excellence is mostly for instructors and teachers. So a lot of those contractors, a lot of the folks that we all know on that side of things were not there. But there was a few others. There's the guy that does the True Tech tools. I think he was there. I think he's got a podcast, and a few others. But yeah, so it was pretty cool to see the folks that I did see. I did a LinkedIn post. If any of you guys follow me on LinkedIn, I did a LinkedIn post. Clifton was there, obviously. Clifton Beck, that does the Did You Know ESCO Institute show. So that was cool. In fact, I got to sit in his booth and do my show. That's where I was at last week. I was sitting in his booth. So that was kind of cool. Let's see. Brian says, "Brazing is an art. Add a cap tube to 7/8 inch copper." Yeah. No thanks. Isn't the industry moving to press fittings more for installs and repairs at this point? That's what everybody keeps saying. That's what my RLS rep keeps saying. But I tell you the one thing that makes me nervous about the press fittings is if I go chopping that bell off, I want to know that the outside diameter of the manufacturer side of that copper is dead on. And I wish there was something to designate, like if it said that on there, because it does make me nervous. I did a system last week actually when I got back from that event. In fact, on Saturday, and I brazed these two systems in because I was so nervous. I was like, if I go chopping those bells off and the outside diameter is either too small or too big for me to get my fitting on there. Now later I found out from the rep for that company that it would have been fine. I could have chopped it off and pressed, but I was just so nervous about that. So yeah, we'll see. What is the Daikin Hero, a commercial unit? So Daikin Hero is the equivalent to like the Daikin One Cloud in residential. So you can install it and control hundreds of units. Like you just install it and it starts communicating with everything. And a building can have 300 units in the building and you'll be able to see them all and control them all with the Daikin Hero, which is really cool. Here is a monitoring software. LD says, good evening, Guy. Joining quite late. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. I'm sorry for murdering your name. Brian says Bergman. I don't know if you're asking if Bergman was there, but he was not. At least I didn't see him. The guy from ACA was there with the beard. He was there. Yeah. So there were a lot of people there, but so I probably consume more of the entertaining shows like mine. I like to think that mine is educational, but also a little entertaining, hopefully, especially when we have a guest. And so, that's why so I've seen Brett Wetzel on stuff. I've seen Ty obviously on a bunch of stuff, and then Jennifer. I watch the HVAC Misfits shows sometimes, so I don't know if you guys have seen that, but they were all there. That was pretty cool. But I think the ACA show is going on now. I saw a post on one of the platforms, LinkedIn or one of them, and they're doing an event now. So hopefully they're getting some good stuff out of that. And yeah. LD says, Josh, I tried emailing you, but it's the one that says it's not monitored. What's the best email to send you the info for our second virtual option about my crazy house? If you sent it to that email, then my team got it. That's the best email. If we may just not have talked about it on our show yet. I do know there are some emails that are in there that we have been planning to do a show and highlight those. In fact, maybe I can go look while we're live right now. I probably shouldn't, but yeah, I'm not going to fool with that right this second. But that is the best email. The reason, so you might be talking about, you get an automated message back because some people are like, hey, I emailed you. You never responded. Well, that's because that's not what that email is. We don't monitor it and respond. It's not for that. So, but yeah. So yeah, if you sent it there, then we got it. So, yeah, so I went to the brazing class. I went to that hero class. That was cool. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. There's a guy named Joey Henderson, or Jojo, I think. He has a YouTube channel now, and he's got some really cool stuff. He's actually the guy that I watched a training where he talked about the whole PSC motors with variable speed motors and why a lot of folks today are hearing they're having their system replaced with a higher end system only for it to be louder. And I told him that. I was like, yeah, I learned that from you. And anyway, so he might be on our show soon too. Um, really smart guy. And I went to his class too. Ryan says, do certain states allow a tech with a license in one state to work and do installs in another? Are there exceptions? I'm asking to see if you'd do a road show a few times a year and get paid. So the answer to your question is yes. So some states do recognize other states licensing, but it's really weird the way they do it. So I know why you're about to say North Carolina. I knew it. I don't think North Carolina and Virginia fall in that. Um, but I remember when I went to school originally to be an electrician, um, there we were able to go to Maryland with our licenses, but we couldn't go to West Virginia, or at least not back then. I'm wanting to say it changed over the years, but but West Virginia did not recognize it. So some of I think two of our employees had to go get their master's licenses in a whole nother state, which is not easy to do, by the way. So kudos to them. I mean, if you're able to get a master's license in multiple states, that's really cool. So Ryan says, me in North Carolina hired you to install a system for content and paid you for the installation. LOL. Um, yeah, I would not be able to do that, but I don't know, maybe if you find out that you are putting a system in, maybe I'll still hit the road with a camera and come down. But obviously whoever's putting the system in would have to be okay with that. And not everyone is. So Brian says only a few states care, usually union. Pulling a permit is the issue. Yeah, that is the issue, right? So a lot of folks are not licensed that do work, but it's not a problem. There's no policing it. It only becomes a problem when there's a big problem or when it comes to pulling a permit. At least that's how Virginia is. There's nobody really policing it. Now, I have heard of states where they do police it hard, where they have even run sting operations. I think we covered that on our show one time, where I'm wanting to say it was Texas, but I could be wrong. But there was a state where they were running a sting operation, and these guys would come to the house to do certain type of work, and found out that that they were not licensed, and they were I don't know if they were throwing them in jail or just fining them or whatever, but they were definitely policing that. So Ildy says, OMG, yes, sign me up too. You can film my house already enough to teach people what not to do and then how to fix it. Yeah. I'm sure your contractor would love that if I was there with a camera and telling them all the stuff they're doing wrong. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that on every single install though? I've always said that you could do a job and I could do a job, and I could probably go find 5 things you did wrong, and you could probably come find 5 things I did wrong, right? There's always more than one way to do something. And I think at the end of the day, if you just get a technician that cares, that is half the battle, right? Finding someone that cares enough to do the job right, even if I might have done it a different way, maybe there was a way to do it where it was a little less sloppy or something like that. If they at least care enough to, to do things as neat as possible, they care enough to flow nitrogen when they're brazing, and they care enough to purge, and they care enough to pull a triple vacuum, and they care enough to to make sure all the um electrical connections are tight. I went behind a guy actually just 2 weeks ago, and I was telling him that I was able to pull on the wire and it came right out of the spade connector. And he's like, well, it was working. And I'm like, yeah, but that's how you burn people's houses down. Yeah, it was working, but that loose wire creates heat. And here we go, because somebody always says when they see this, so some guy's gonna see this video in the future, maybe, just maybe, and then put some jerky comment, because they always say, oh, you're just using scare tactics. No, dude, you're burning people's houses down. If you haven't yet, you will. Because I mean, how many times have you grabbed just tomorrow, go to a heat kit, a heat kit that's running and reach up in there and grab some of the wires. Don't get shocked. But if you touch some of the wires, you'll notice some are warmer than others. And that's how they get, that's it. That's it. That if you get a loose connection, it'll start to get hotter and hotter and hotter until eventually it does catch on fire. And so anyway, that just really, really bothered me when somebody says, well, it was working. Well, I don't care if it was working. Electrical is my biggest pet peeve. It really is. It always annoys me when somebody's like, well, I know how to do electrical. Just because you know how to do you learned how to wire a three-way switch does not mean you know how to do electrical. It does not mean that you're not going to burn somebody's house down, because you just might if you keep sloppy work. As a homeowner, I want it registered more than permitted. Obviously, both is great. Yeah. We get sold by the salespeople that their team cares. Then the installers come and do mediocre or bad jobs. Yeah, that's the case in some companies, but I would argue that it's not the case at all. Every company. That was one of the things that I got big time spoiled at my company, because I had that guy I was just telling y'all about that could braze. He could do duct work. Like, no, I mean, it was an art. I mean, he was just awesome. And he was almost 70. He's been in a few of our YouTube videos. I might be getting him to do another one. His name's Kenny. Used to work for me. We might be doing a YouTube video together soon. Can't wait to do that one too. You guys stay tuned for that one, because that's gonna be a fun one. I don't want to tell you yet what it'll be about, because I'm gonna pick on him if we do it. But anyway, Kenny liked doing installs, and he was good at it, and he did care, and he had more experience than anyone I ever met on it. He was just, I got spoiled. Our best installer was a guy that, you know, was doing heating and air when I was born. So Brian says we chased a Fujitsu VRF comm issue weeks. We would find something and then gone. Then back, finally stopped. So did you ever find it though? Because I'm curious how you found it. Those comm issues, it can. So I mean, I've seen systems where just having the communication cable too close to some electronic device. We had a mini split, I don't know, a year or two ago, where they had the it was a VRV system, and the communication cable, when they went through the slim duct, was right up against the high voltage, and we separated them and put some Armaflex in there to keep them separate. Never had another problem. So it can definitely be a bear. Ryan says, when you find a good tech, treat them right. I know I do, and tip them. There you go. Man, I think we just end on that tonight, Ryan. Amen to that. When you find a good one and know you found a good one that cares, right? There's that word again. I don't know. I mean, back to the electrical thing. I was talking. So one of the guys that's a really good friend of mine to this day, he was my boss. He was my first. It wasn't at my first ever job, but I always say it was my first real job, right? It was my first job out of trade school, out of high school, that I was getting paid, I think, $8 an hour at an electrical company. And he taught me all these different things. And I was talking to him now. So fast forward to today, here we are 25 years later, and 20 years later, 22 years later. And he's a really good friend. But I was telling him, I was like, I don't know if it's just me, my personality, or if you just drilled it into me to not cut corners on stuff like that. But I was telling him the story I was just telling you guys, that, there are just some things you just cannot cut corners on. So let's see. Josh, how does the industry attract more women to join HVAC or trades in general? It's a really good question. I listened to a podcast today where the lady that is in charge at I think the organization is called Women in HVACR, and it's which is a nonprofit, and they focus on mentor mentee relationships and just helping ladies through all of that. But it's a really good question. You guys have probably heard me say women were always my best employees, and I had some really good guys too, but I'd have to go through 30 guys to find a good one. Whereas it seemed like every one of the ladies I hired were good. They were mature, um they didn't complain. They obviously we all have our strengths and weaknesses. I'm not saying that every woman was the super tech that I would hire. I'm not saying that, but I just didn't have the issues that I did have with a lot of the men that I would hire, or boys that I would hire, some of the young guys that we would hire. So I think that I think there are some people that are like that organization that are doing some good things. I think that social media helps. So as we see more women um doing our trade, and you know making it funner, making it just a better place. Unfortunately, there's always those workplaces where there are immature men that don't make the uh company a safe space for women to work at, and sometimes they get in trouble literally because of that. But and I would hate for any lady to have to be put through that, to have to even deal with that. But that's not a cop out. I think that I think heating and air, especially in comparison to a lot of the other trades, is a trade that women can do very well with. If you are a lady and you see this, I would consider HVAC trade over many of the others that are out there, for many reasons, but ultimately because I've firsthand seen women do really well at it. So yeah, it's a really good question though. I'm actually not opposed to maybe reaching out to that organization and having that lady on here one week too, because I thought it was a good show, and it was interesting hearing her perspective on that. Ildy says, a duct wizard, please use my picks to discuss with him in a video soon. Emery says, what is the purpose of emergency heat on a heat pump thermostat? Ooh, that's a loaded question there, Emery. So ultimately, it's about control. Um, so if you have emergency heat, you're able to tell that thermostat, hey, I don't want to run off the heat pump. I don't want to run off of first or second stage, or whatever you have there. I want to run off of auxiliary heat. And you have the control to tell that system that, especially in a world where a lot of thermostats are trying to avoid auxiliary heat as much as possible. They're trying to save energy. There's things like heat droop and backup stage timers and all kinds of other things that will try to give that heat pump a chance to reach temperature before bringing on backup forms of heat that use more energy. But that emergency heat mode is your control, your way of telling that thermostat, I don't want you to save energy right now. I want you to just, let's bring on that auxiliary heat. That's my emergency heat. So that's the main reason. I'm sure there's other situations, but yeah, I think the shortage in labor seems related to having more women in the trades. But I know that's been hard to do. Half the population isn't that aware of careers in the trades, and that hurts the supply. Great topic and great points. Um, I I listened to a show not long ago where they talked about how um if a company is hiring and it's a friendly place to women, and it's a place where they really want a woman to consider applying for that job, then they may even want to go so far as to say that in the description, because a lot of ladies will read and it's good or bad, well, it's bad, but right or wrong, I guess, um is the better way to say it. When they read some job descriptions that whether they're using words that are more masculine or they're using words that would lead them to believe that that company would not even consider a woman, that company needs to go for as far as saying, hey, women please apply, equal opportunity employer here. This is a position that we will consider any person that meets what we're looking for here, you know. Now obviously that again, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and if no matter their gender at all, if it's a blue collar job and they're going to have to get their hands dirty, and then the person that applies, man or woman, is not willing to do the job, they're not willing to climb a ladder, they're not willing to get in a crawl space, well, then maybe they're not a fit, right? But you know, I I think it's a really good point. Really good. I a lot of you guys know I'm a big fan of our trade and what it can offer ladies specifically, and hopefully I don't know that we'll ever get to a day that the majority of people in our trade are women. But how cool would that be if that was, um maybe especially when you compare it to other trades, I think it'd be cool. Brian says lots of wire nuts, butt connectors only. Biggest was a signal amplifier with a loose connection in a hidden box, not hidden on the wall unmarked. Oh wow, so you had a lot of things to chase there on that communication issue. Wow. Only the solid women would show up mentally. Uh Hello, sorry I'm late. Hey Bob, good to see you, buddy. Not safe for anybody sometimes. Hub Jeep says, my new Bosch central unit does not remove humidity. For the first time, I see that may be black mold around my ceiling ducts. I wish I still had my old R22 unit. Hub Jeep, I did a video on this exact topic. If you go to my channel and search for Bosch or search for, I can't remember what the humidity's, I can't remember what the video is called, but it's something to the effect of Bosch high humidity or something like that. And there are a few things that you'll be able to do to make that system. Now, just in general, it's a non-communicating inverter system, so it's not ever going to dehumidify as well as some of the other systems that are out there. But setting the capacity switch, make sure that's set, making sure the airflow is set correctly, set it even lower if you can. Um, sensible capacity, but you'll gain latent capacity, meaning it'll dehumidify better. And then finally, flipping on with some models, you flip on dip switch 4, which is the target cooling set point that it looks for on that saturation temperature coming back from the evaporator coil. And you're going to increase that for that target. So it'll be a colder coil. It'll remove more humidity. And so you must be in a warm climate though, if you're already worrying about humidity. Because some of us are still cold, daggone it. Today wasn't too bad. I think it got up maybe to the high 50s here in Virginia. I can't remember, but I don't remember it being warm today. So Hub Jeep, think about adding a whole house dehumidifier and change airspeed lower. Yep. What's the title? Kids breathing mold. So we talked about earlier in the show, Mystic, if you go back and watch the beginning, a story where an elementary school, they're breathing mold at that school. So it was a very interesting story we shared there. Higher efficiency is less moisture removal. The black mold is probably no insulation on supply boots, maybe one sentence. Not always, Brian. I'm gonna have to buck you on that one a little bit. Higher efficiency does not always mean less moisture removal. I would argue that some communicating inverter systems dehumidify better only because they run longer to reach temperature. So might buck you on that one a little. As we are wrapping up, I've got a few more questions here, but do me a favor, even if you've done it before, if you know a good Apple in our industry, a good heating and air, electrical, or plumbing company, drop their name in the chat and where they're located. And I would like to highlight them right here on the screen and show some love to some of the good companies that are out there. So drop those in the chat as well. And you never know, we might be able to send some business to those good apples. Send them your way, them their way, because you said their name, and you might have someone in your area that saw it. Ryan says, Josh, last question: is that Bosch issue an issue for all non-communicating inverter systems, or just the Bosch? I think it's for all not, because if you think about the technology in general and how it operates, the alls it cares about, it's a very cool technology. I have a Bosch in my own home, you know. Hisense makes a non-communicating inverter system. I've actually talked to the folks at Daikin and said, hey, I don't know that Daikin will ever get there, because they're so far, that's old news now. For those of you that don't know, Daikin's a sponsor on our show, and they're also the company I sold at my company. But they're just, they got the Altherma coming out, so they're looking at air to water. I'm sorry, yeah, air to water technology, and that itself dehumidifies, or at least I've been told dehumidifies really well. But in general, Ryan, yes, if you think about the non-communicating inverter systems, they're already by default going to not, especially if they're not set up correctly, and the airflow is not set right, and all of that, because you've got a system that will not always have long run times, and it's going to reach temperatures pretty quickly. And you've got to do things to manipulate that and increase your latent capacity as much as possible. Hang until the end. Nice show, Josh. Good to visit and with you and the regulars around here. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, we're gonna like I said, we're gonna have some guests coming up here soon. So chances are we might have a guest next week. Keep an eye on that, you guys. Ryan says super cool HVAC and TNC heating and cooling, both in Charlotte Metro. So shout out to those companies. Emery says, how long should a properly sized HVAC system run in order to remove humidity? The answer to that, Emery, is as long as possible. So most systems are sized to, so like, when they do a load calculation, if it's a 95-degree day, to run all day to reach this target set point, of whatever that load is. So, the problem is not every day is 95 degrees outside, right? For those of us that live in states where it may only reach 100 degrees twice that year, we have a lot of mild days and mild mornings and mild evenings. And we need systems that are going to at least run as long as possible and continue to remove humidity. Almost every tight house will need dehumidification. The equipment doesn't run below dew point on long maintenance runs. Great point. Altherma again, I have stories. Looks like I'm the only one thinking getting a whole house humidifier for the winter days. You must be in a dry state. And that's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. At AHR, most of the manufacturers have non-communicating inverter systems now. The industry is moving that direction, but I want communicating myself after listening to you for years. LOL. Well, thanks, pal. I appreciate that. I think you're seeing a lot of the imported products go non-communicating inverter, but I mean, even some of those brands I've talked to, one in particular, I've talked to their reps, national sales reps, and they're all moving. That one in particular is moving in a direction of non-communicating. So I think the task here is having moving in the direction of communicating. But the task becomes with a lot of these communicating systems of having a system that the proprietary thermostat is not too pricey, and the system itself, right? So that's what a lot of the brands are looking at. As I hate to keep saying Daikin, but that's why Daikin invented the Fit. They wanted a budget friendly option with all the bells and whistles and capabilities of some of the really high end systems. So in Houston, we don't need humidifiers at all. Communicating is great. After warranty, it is so expensive. The controllers are so expensive. Yep. Yeah, we're all on the same page there. So good enough. Well, cool guys. Any Canadians here? Shout out to folks up north. I'm in Northern Virginia, but like to open windows for fresh air. Amen. That's good stuff. Well, good enough. Well, thank you guys. Again, we may or may not have a guest next week. I am going to be on the road next week. I'm doing a class down in North Carolina for a company, and I'll probably be doing our show from my RV. I believe that's next week. That's either next week or the week after. Hold on one second. Let me verify. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the week after next. So we may have a guest next week. I will let you guys know. It'll be on April Fools. We will be here. I won't be fooling you. In the meantime, appreciate you guys. If you are not subscribed to our channel, we'd appreciate it. And you'll be up to date on the latest tips and news in the HVAC industry. Hit that bell after hitting subscribe and you'll get notified every time we post something new. That said, make it a great week. For the rest of you, we'll see you next week. Take care.